Hi there, Liz here, and we are at EMOS Creative Studio, where anything and everything you create is beautiful because you created it. And this tutorial, I am going to be showing you how I make a quilt as you go block. I've modified it to make it easier for me to make the block. Now, most quilt as you go blocks, there are three pieces: the back, the batting, and the top, as you will see in this one. And as you can see, the back of mine is kind of wrinkled, and I don't like the wrinkled look. So what I'm going to do is I'm still going to do quilt as you go with the top and the batting, and then I will add the back later. So let's get started. As you can see here, this is a quilt as you go block using 2.5 inch width strips, and I got these strips from a Jelly Roll, which is a manufacturer's pre-cut. They take 42 pieces of a designer or their line and they put it together into a roll. So what I did was I chose different fabrics to make this particular block. Now again, I said a quilt as you go block is the top, the batting, which I think I have this side not sewn, yeah, the batting, and then your back. Now when I've made these quilt as you go blocks, I kind of get, well, I don't kinda, I get wrinkles in the back and I don't like the way they look. So let me show you what I'm going to do. First of all, I'm not using a Jelly Roll. I'm actually using 3 different fabrics. Here's the batting that I chose, and I'll tell you what the size is. I'll put it in the screen down here. This is the batting. I'm making a little table topper. And then here are the 3 fabrics. These 2 fabrics are going to be used for the stripes in an angular quilt as you go. And then this one will be used as the bottom piece. So to save some time, I've already cut my pieces. I have 2 strips that are 2.5 inches wide by WOF. And WOF is width of fabric. So I've got my printed, let me show you on the white. I've got my printed set and I've got my red set. And then what I did was I cut out a piece of fabric a little bit larger than the batting, as you can see here. So the very first thing I want to do is I want to mark my batting where I'm going to be sewing. Again, remember I told you that I'm going to be doing a modified version of quilt as you go. So here at the cutting mat, I've told you before that each block is 1 inch square, 1 inch this way and 1 inch this way. Some mats have delineations of 1/2 and 1/4, every 1/2 and every 1/4 inch. So let's just talk about what we're going to do with this. I'm going to take my batting and I'm going to measure it up against one of the boxes, and I want to make sure that my corner fits in very carefully right here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to count up 3 boxes or 3 inches. 1, 2, 3, and at the top I'm going to make a little mark. Then on the bottom I'm going to mark 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to make a little mark right here. Most rulers will have markings for 30 degrees, 45 degrees, and 60 degrees. What we're looking for is the 45 degree angle, and what I want to do is I want to measure it up against the bottom of my batting. And what I'm going to do is, while I have this black line measuring up to the bottom of my batting, it's going to allow me to draw a straight line from this pink mark to this pink mark. So let me take my marker and draw my line all the way across. And what I am using, this is a Crayola Ultra Clean Washable marker. And this mark will wash off. Well, there's no need for me to worry if it's going to wash off or not wash off, because this is going to be in the inside of the table mat. I like to always start with the colored fabric. You see there's a right bright side and a wrong dull side. So some people say that the right side is called the pretty side. So what I want to do is I want to cut off the selvage, S-E-L-V-A-G-E, I think I spelled it right. And this is the manufacturer end of the fabric. And as you can see, there's some little pokey holes. When the fabric is being printed, this fabric is already woven. It's 100% cotton, and it's put onto pins. And then it's sent through a machine and it's printed. And that's what these holes are. These are the pinholes where the fabric is placed so that it could be printed. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut it. It doesn't have to be even. I just want to make sure that I get rid of the little holes and the selvage part of this piece of fabric. What I'm going to do is, with the right side facing up to me, I'm going to have about 1 inch or so on each side, and I'm going to put the topmost one of the sides up against this pink line to cover my corner. Can you see right here? I'm going to cover my corner with this piece of fabric. Now, I don't want this piece of fabric moving, so I'm going to go ahead and place 1 pin to hold it so that I can continue with the next part of what I'm going to do. Just 1 pin to hold it. Now, if I want to, I can go ahead and cut it about 1 inch or so away, because I'm not flipping this over. So I'm going to take the excess fabric off to get it out of my way and put it off to the side. What I'm going to do is take my solid fabric again. I like to cut off the selvage, and this particular fabric is solid and it's folded with the right side inside. And I can tell that this is the right side. Sorry, you didn't see anything I just did, sorry. The right side is folded inside, so I know. Plus, this particular fabric, it's nice and smooth on one side and it's kind of rough on the other. So the nice smooth side is the right side or pretty side of the fabric. Again, I'm going to cut off the selvage part with the holes. And I'm going to throw my piece of garbage away. And then I'm going to put right sides together. I'm going to match the end that's on the pink line together. And then I'm going to carefully remove the pin that's holding the other piece of fabric. And I'm going to pin the corners, making sure that my pins will not be in the way of sewing on my sewing machine. So let me show you this again. So now I've pinned it, and it's ready for me to make a 1/4 inch seam allowance sewing down this side of the 2 pieces of fabric. So what I did was I took my printed fabric, pretty side or right side up facing me, and I lined it up against this line right here. I put a pin in so won't jiggle around, and then I put the solid fabric nice side or pretty side facing down. So right sides together is what the technical phrase is, sorry. Right sides together. And I pinned both so that it isn't jiggling around when I sew it on my machine. Now, one thing I forgot to show you, let me quickly show you this while we're here. Now you see we're working at an angle. Do not cut your fabric, these long strips, before you see how it's going to end up. Now, if I were you, I would put the fabric each side together, and you see right here, if I had left it like this part of the batting would be showing. So I'm going to move it up so that when it's folded open, the batting is covered. Same thing with this side. Now I know that it's going to come up to here, so I'm going to cut it off right here. So I have less of a tail to be working with. Now I can put my right sides together, kind of centering it, and now I can pin it. I'll pin it here, and I will pin it on this side. And the next thing is we're going to sew our 1/4 inch seam allowance. So let's move over to the machine. I'm ready to sew my pieces together. Now on this machine, which is the Bernina Burnett 92C, which is an older machine, this foot is not a true 1/4 inch foot. If you can see right here, and I don't know if I can get this to go in underneath more that you can see it, there is a groove that's right here. This groove matches up to, let me show you, the 1/4 inch marking that I have here on my machine. This goes beyond the 1/4 inch, and it'll make my 1/4 inch a little bit too big and wide. So I need to measure, keep my end of the fabric butting up next to this notch here. I put my thread to the side because I don't want to have that nest underneath. I start my sewing at the edge right here of the batting. I'm trying to keep my hand out of the way so you can see. And I'm going to make sure that my edge of my fabric is indeed at the 1/4 inch marking, and it is. So this is a machine that I operate using a button up here. It's not bring this out a little bit more so you can see it. I use, you still can't see it. Well, this machine operates on and off with a, yeah, you can't see it, with a button that I turn on and off, and then a regulator stitch to make it go faster and slower. So what I did is I've got it on the slowest setting right now until I feel comfortable sewing. So let me go ahead and zoom in for you. I always hold the ends of my thread because I don't want that nesting, that bunched up thread underneath my project. So I'm going to turn my machine on, and I'm going to be going fairly slow because I want to make sure this edge goes up against the line that's right here for a true 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I sew to the end of the batting, and I turn my machine off. This machine is set so that the needle always, the last stitch ends with the needle up. I'm going to clip with my scissors, put my thread underneath, and then I'm going to take my pins out, put them in my pin cup, pull this out, and my first stitch, let me get this underneath here so you can see. This is my first attachment of the two 2.5 inch wide strips. So I will go to my iron, and I'm going to do that real quick, but I'm not going to have you look at it. I'm going to talk to you, and I'm going to quickly press. We know that pressing means putting the iron down and not wiggling it back and forth. Now this particular red fabric gets dark when it gets hot. I don't know if you can see it. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take another piece of my printed fabric, this right here, and I'm going to line it up. Let's see if we can do this so I don't have to turn off the video and move to the cutting board. Now I think you can see both ends of my batting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to butt it up first to make sure that I have enough fabric on each side of the batting so that when I'm done sewing, I don't have a piece of or a white edge of the batting hanging out. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut off right about here so I don't have something flapping around in the wind. And then I'm going to put right sides together. I know I've got long tails at these ends, but I'm more concerned with pinning the two, well actually it's 3 layers because it's the bottom strip, the top strip, and the batting. Now I still can get away with only 2 pins, 1 on each corner. And now I'm going to turn my item around. Make sure I'm at the line that delineates 1/4 inch. I'm going to hang on to my string. I lost my string. Alright, there's my string. Put it 1/4 inch. Sorry if my fingers are in the way right now. I'm going to hold it down. I'm going to turn on my machine. And let go of my thread. And I'm going to make this machine go just a little bit faster because I'm feeling a lot more confident that I'm going to actually follow my line and not make a mistake. Making sure the edge is matching up to this right here. Don't get nervous, ladies and gentlemen. I won't get my finger caught, knock on wood, knock on wood, underneath the needle. I've done it twice. I am an expert at keeping my fingers away from the needle when the machine's happening. So, here we go. We've got the third piece on. We're going to pull off our pins. And I'm going to finger press it open so that you can see what it looks like. And there you go, that's your third piece. Now I'm going to roll over, and I'm not going to show you, but you'll hear me ironing open this piece so that I can add another solid piece. Again, we want to make sure that we're covering this edge and this edge of our batting. So we're going to take a red piece. Now, I want you to know that I did not cut off the selvage ends on both ends of this piece because I need an orientation to know which side is the good side, especially if I don't have good feeling in my fingers. If I'm somebody that's suffering from arthritis or neuritis, arthritis or neuropathy because I'm diabetic. I actually am diabetic. All I suffer from right now is arthritis. I still have somewhat decent feeling in my fingers, but still, I'm being very careful and cautious. Okay, so on this side, I know I have this much, and on this side, I'm already covering the tips. So I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut it off at about here because I don't want this flipping around. I'm just going to slide it down very carefully so that I can match my edges. Right here's one edge and here's another edge. So now I'm going to be using probably 3 or 4 pins to hold everything in place. I'll put one here. I'll put one here. And I'll put one at this end. Making sure everything is nice and the other strip is nice and tight. Oops. I'm going to pin it. I'm going to turn it around, find my end of the string thread, and hang on to it. Match it up best as I can here. Hold my string, turn on my machine, and here I go. I can let go of my thread because I put into 3 or 4 stitches and it won't make that bird's nest or clump of thread underneath. And I'll show you that momentarily. Now because I'm using the little gouge or the little indentation right here as my guide, I'm not going to make this machine go any faster because I want to make sure that I get a true 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. And I'm almost at the end. Needle ends up in the up position. Cut the threads. I'll put this underneath here so you can see what it looks like when I open it up. I'm going to open up the piece and I'm going to finger press it all the way across. Okay, do you see right here? You see right here, there's a fold. So I'm going to have to cut some of the stitching, probably to about here, and then re-stitch it because I've got a little fold in the fabric right here. So that will be easy to do. Sorry if my handhead are in the way. I have temporary lighting because I'm not up in my studio permanently. This is my permanent sewing studio. I'm moving back up here slowly, piece by piece. I set up one of my machines up here. I still have my other mini sewing studio set up downstairs, but since it was a nice sunny day and the first day of fall 2018, I thought I'd come up here where it's a little bit cooler. Keep on pulling the wrong threads, and shoot a video. I know the light's kind of crummy, so once I move up here permanently, I'll have better lighting. Alright, so we got that unstitched. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it around and I'm going to try to match up the needle to the thread where it was sewn. Right there. Hopefully I won't get a bird's nest. I got a needle right here. I'm going to reverse it and then move it forward and make sure that I don't fold up that fabric, and I'm going to go all the way to the end because it was at the end pretty much of this row. So again, let's slide this underneath, open this up, finger press it. Much better. So you see how it looks? Now we're getting that nice look. I'm going to go ahead and finish this all the way up to the final piece off camera. It's all the same. I'm alternating solid print, solid print, solid print, solid print. I should end up with the print at the end, but we'll see when I come back. So I am now finished with my Quilt As You Go table topper, and you can see that I've got all sorts of edges hanging out. If I turn this over, you will see that I need to do some trimming. Let me turn it over again so you can see that everything is at an angle. Unfortunately, I was not able to end with a print. You're probably going to see a little bit of the red once I put the underside or backing on. But the next thing I want to do is I want to trim off all these edges. And we're going to turn it this way. I'm going to grab my ruler. I know I have a ruler big enough that I can put the black line down here and match it up to the edge of the batting. And my batting should be straight because I straightened it out before I started putting this together. I'm going to pull this up a little higher, and I'm going to use a different line because I want to grab all of this edge right here. Now I'm going to stand up to cut, only because I only want to cut this once. Press down, move up, make sure your fingers are not. I am so sorry, I lost the battery in the middle of my sentence. I was not able to show you me cutting the other 3 edges. So I was saying, make sure that you don't have your fingers in the way, because these things are super sharp. And again, I've done a video that tells you about how to cover this after you cut. Now I have a perfectly, well, it's almost squared. Let me see what the size of this thing is. This is 10.5 by 11. It's not quite square, but it's a very nice, it's a nice looking table mat that you could put your lamp on. Let me see if I can reach the lamp. You could put your lamp on it on a table, a really nice, or you could put a little Christmas decoration, or you could put it anywhere to decorate. So the next thing we want to do is we want to attach our backing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the backing on my table cutting mat, on my table or on my cutting mat, right side up, the pretty side facing up, and you notice I still have the selvage on this side. Remember I said that I cut this piece a little bit bigger than the actual mat, and as you can see I have a good inch and a half all the way around. Now sometimes you'll see that the fabric isn't actually printed straight, so you can kind of straighten that, and I learned this trick when I was in seamstress school. You can actually pull the ends of your fabric and kind of straighten out the grain to make your fabric a little bit straighter, and yeah, it did work out a little bit. So I'm going to try to center this as best as I can, and it doesn't help that I didn't cut it straight down here. I'm going to center this the best that I can, and I'm going to start with pinning my first corner up here. I'm going to add another pin right here. Now I'm pinning far enough away from the edge that I'm not going to be sewing over my pins. In my industrial professional machine, that is a baby lock, it's a Jane I believe, that I can sew over pins. It was made to sew over pins. This machine that I'm working on with now does not sew over pins. I've already broken several needles doing that, thinking I was being cute and adorable, but because I was lazy, and I broke my needles. I've had this Bernina for many, many years. This is the very first sewing machine. No, it's the second sewing machine because I did do a trade-in. My first machine, I believe, was a Brother, and I traded in for this Bernette. Bernina is the machine that I learned how to sew on 44 years ago. So many years ago. I covered my mouth when I said the years. 40 plus years ago, okay? And I learned how to sew on a Bernina. I went to an all-girls Catholic high school, and it was a better school, and they had, since it was a better school, they had better equipment, so they of course had a full amount. They had the money that they could buy the better machines rather than have a Singer or a Brother or something like that. So I learned how to sew on a Bernina. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make markings. And why I'm making markings is I want to mark where I'm going to start sewing and where I'm going to end sewing. I want to be able to stick my fingers in and grab the corners to turn this inside out. So I'm going to mark up here. I usually just mark by eye, but I'm going to give you markings 1, 2, 3, 4. You can do 5 inches. That should be big enough for you to stick your hand in and pull your item through. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to show you me sewing around because it's very simple. I'm going to do 1/4 of an inch sewing all the way around. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my presser foot as the guide, and it's going to be a little bit bigger than 1/4 of an inch. And that's okay because I'm not following a specific pattern. This is something that I'm putting together because I thought it would be really cute as a table topper for Christmas. I backstitch at the beginning and at the end so that when I have my hand through and I'm pulling it through, I'm not ripping open the stitches. So I'll come back and show you what it looks like after I've stitched it. I've now stitched it all the way around, leaving a little opening so I could stick my hand in, and I'm showing you the back side, and you can see it's not as wrinkly as if I would have done it with putting the backing on, doing a quilt as you go. I'm going to remove my pins because my fingers tend to always catch on to the pointy edges. Now the next thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to cut off the excess fabric. And I'm not going to use my rotary cutter. I'm just going to use a pair of scissors and run it up the fabric. If it hangs out or shows a little bit, that's okay. I'm not trying to be perfect here. Go on each side all the way around. And we're going to cut the last side. And if you get it good, you probably can slide your scissors across. The other thing I want to do is I want to cut the corners to make it easier from when I turn it inside out. I don't have a big bunch up of fabric there. Please make sure when you're cutting your corners that you do not cut into the stitching, because then you will have a problem and you'll have to turn your item inside out and restitch everything over again, and that becomes quite a hassle because you then have to change the seam allowance to a different size. So now you see that this opening right here is big enough for me to slide my hand in. I grab a corner, put it in, and I pull it out. The bigger the opening, the better it is for you to pull out your item. And hot diggity dog, I didn't bring up my chopstick. All right, so I'm going to stick my finger in and try to push it out the best way I can, because I am clumsy. If I stick my scissors in, I am for sure gonna poke a hole into this thing, and I really don't want to do that. So let me see if I can poke out the holes really good. I learned of a different way to pull out your corners, and I'm a little nervous about doing it. Someone said to take a pin and just pull out the fabric, but I'm a little nervous. But let's try it on camera here and see what the heck happens if I do that. Oops, let me lower it so you can see what I'm doing. You just stick in your pin and just pull out. Oh, look at! It did do it. Okay, so I shouldn't be such a scaredy cat. I normally use a chopstick. When we go to the Asian restaurants, I always get an extra pair of chopsticks so that I can bring home and use. They already know at the restaurant that that's what I take home, the extra chopsticks. She laughs at me. Well, the former owners were sisters, and they would giggle every time I said I needed chopsticks for sewing. They thought it was funny. I don't think these owners, the new owners, think it's cute, but they let me do it. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the ironing board, and I'm going to iron this flat. I'm also going to iron this folded. I'm going to show you what I do next. Maybe I'll move the camera back so you can see me iron, since it's right here. Let me move all my items over. Right now I'm just ironing with a hot iron. I don't have steam in it, and it does pretty good. It's not burning anything. I've got it set at 1 notch below cotton, so I know it's not going to burn anything, but I know that it's actually pressing. I'm actually ironing, I'm not pressing. I'm going to do both sides. And you see how it crisply that it ironed out. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, the open edge, usually the bottom folds in naturally. I'm going to finger press it, and then I'm going to fold in the top edge to get a really nice looking edge here. I try to get it as close as possible, like such. I hold it with my fingers, and then I put my iron on it, Usually with the other iron, I give it a good spritz of, or a good shot of steam. That iron is downstairs. I didn't bring it up because I'm still sewing down there. It'll be a while before I move up here 100%. I want to paint the walls. I'm going to do a lot of things, but again, like I said, I'm going to be doing a video talking about. Next video will be talking about what I'm going to be doing up here. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use a permanent fabric glue. I'm sorry, I don't know the name of this, but this is recommended from one of my group pages on my on Facebook. You just open it up. Let me take the little fiber off. And I just put some glue down here all the way across, and then I carefully, my folded top edge gets folded over, press it with my hand first, or finger press it as such, turn it around, finger press it again as such, and then I'm going to make it a permanent adherent, if there's such a word, make it permanently adhere to each other by putting the warm iron on it. Now, for all intents purposes, I have completed my table mat. I am still at the design stage of how I want to finish this off. I personally like how these smaller ones look without a border. If I put a border on, it takes away from the print. I probably will be using a red thread, and I'm going to top stitch either 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch all the way across. And the only reason I'm doing this is so that this doesn't pull totally away from the mat when the customer washes it. But this is the completed mat. Let's see if I can find a spot where you can see. There you go. This is the completed mat. Like I said, it's 10.5 by 11.5. It's a very nice mat. It probably will take you less than 30 minutes to make with the cutting and everything. It took us a little bit longer. So here is the completed table pad mat. It's not really a runner because it's not long enough, but it's a little table mat. You can put it on your table like this, or you can put it on your table like this, however you want to use it. Here's the front. Here's the back. I've made a couple of more, and I'll probably attach pictures at the end of this scene to show you what other designs I've made, not only for the holidays, but for everyday use as well. So, my name is Liz. We are at EMOS Creative Studio, where anything and everything you create is beautiful because you created it. Like, subscribe. Down at the bottom, you'll see a little bell. If you click on that bell, it'll give you a notification every time I make a video. I am going to try to make more videos. Like, subscribe. See me on Facebook, EMOS Liz. Also see me on Instagram with the same acronym, EMOS Liz. Until the next time, happy quilting, happy sewing. Bye.